Just 12 miles northeast of Saratov lies Engels II, a name etched in Cold War stone and built to weather nuclear retaliation. It's home to Russia's prized Tu-95MS Bear-H strategic bombers relics, with wings that still patrol the edge of NATO airspace. Alongside them, Su-34 fullback strike fighters stood armed and fueled, waiting for the signal to rain KAB-500 precision bombs on Ukraine's eastern cities, Kharkiv, Dnipro, and beyond. But on this June morning, Engels II would become the hunted. From deep inside Ukraine's Sumy province, just 20 miles from the Russian border, three compact AI-driven drones lifted quietly into the night sky. Each was no larger than a compact SUV built on a low-budget but high-ingenuity frame, carbon fiber shell, autonomous terrain tracking, and a 20-kilogram tungsten-tipped warhead. Their cost less than a mid-sized sedan, their impact historic. Their flight path was anything but direct. Hugging civilian air corridors, dipping below radar scan cones, and exploiting known blind spots in Russian early warning coverage, they flew over 750 kilometers without a trace. The Russians had long assumed Engels II was beyond the reach of low-altitude incursions. After all, the base was over 500 kilometers from the front lines, shielded by concentric layers of radar and electronic warfare defenses. But that assumption was about to be shattered. At 4:17 a.m., the three drones entered their final approach vectors, each programmed with a different attack pattern. Drone 1 targeted the maintenance hangars. Drone 2 veered toward the aircraft parking zone. Drone 3 held in reserve, its AI scanning for opportunities. This wasn't a swarm attack, it was a chess move. And as dawn crept over the Volga, the stage was set not for an air raid, but for a test of doctrine. Could a high-tech Goliath be brought low by sub-$100,000 ghosts in the wind? The answer was airborne, and it was closing in. The first sign that something was wrong came too late. At precisely 4:24 a.m., Drone 1 slipped beneath the thermal veil of Engels II's perimeter and made its final descent toward Maintenance Hangar Delta. The Russian Podlet K-1 radar system, designed to detect low-flying threats, missed the intrusion entirely. Why? Because Drone 1 was flying below 100 meters, hidden by the base's own surrounding vegetation and low-slung infrastructure. Add in natural thermal interference from tin roofs and fuel vapors, and the drone was practically invisible. Inside the hangar sat a Tu-95MS bomber call sign. Red 091 freshly serviced its engines, still cool, flanked by technicians and support vehicles just hours earlier. Parked nearby in Su-34, labeled Red 34, had just completed a guidance system upgrade. It was fueled, armed, ready to fly. Drone 1 accelerated to 140 km/h and locked onto the center seam of the hangar roof. Its warhead, a 2.6 kilogram dual-stage tungsten core-shaped charge, was engineered for deep penetration and pinpoint detonation. Upon impact, the shaped charge unleashed a superheated plasma jet, moving at over 9,000 meters per second, punching through steel like paper. Less than a second later, the drone's internal timer detonated a secondary charge right above the Tu-95's forward fuselage. The result catastrophic. The explosion vaporized the cockpit of Red 091 and sent a concussive wave through the hangar, igniting residual fuel and rupturing two nearby oxygen tanks. The blast curve collapsed the hangar's central support beam, burying Red 34 under flaming debris and crushing its upgraded avionics pod. A column of fire rose 30 meters into the sky, caught instantly on infrared by a U.S. military satellite trailing over Kazakhstan. In a mobile command post 32 kilometers west, Ukrainian operators watching the infrared feed saw the thermal spike hit critical within seconds. Confirmation rang out. Red 34 neutralized. Hangar Delta destroyed, proceeding to Phase 2. There were still two drones in the sky, but for Russia, the damage had already begun to tear at the doctrine of air superiority. Engels II wasn't untouchable, and the age of passive defense had just met its reckoning. 4:25 a.m., just 60 seconds after the hangar explosion, Drone 2 descended toward Engels II's eastern tarmac, now lit dimly by the glow of rising fire. But this was no retreat. This was precision in motion. Drone 2 shifted left 4 degrees to avoid the debris plume and locked onto a row of strike aircraft parked in a staggered arc across the far apron. Among them, another Tu-95MS and two fully armed Su-34s. One of those aircraft tail marked Red 23 was confirmed by satellite imagery the day before to be preloaded with two KB-500 laser-guided bombs, each capable of flattening a city block. In 16 seconds, it would all be gone. Traveling low and fast, Drone 2's onboard recognition software switched from terrain tracking to thermal imaging. The silhouette of a Tu-95's swept wing and the Su-34's gull-like fuselage became visible through the haze telltale signs of multi-million-dollar targets moments from liftoff. The drone accelerated, adjusted altitude to 110 meters, and aimed not at the cockpit nor the fuselage, but at the junction between the bomb pylon and the fuel line, a vulnerability known only to those who had studied these jets up close. This wasn't luck. This was surgical warfare. At 4:25:41 a.m., Drone 2 struck the underside of Red 23. The shaped charge punched through the outer hull and ignited the first KAB-500. The warhead erupted with a flash that cracked steel and sent a pressure wave screaming across the base. The second bomb followed 1.4 seconds later, turning the tarmac into a crater of fire and molten shrapnel. A fireball 60 meters high surged skyward. 2 aircraft vaporized. Another Tu-95 Red 82 was flipped by the blast, its wings torn away like paper. Pieces of its propellers were later found embedded in a concrete wall 80 meters away. From the Ukrainian command post came a second confirmation: Target 23 destroyed. Fireball confirmed. Drone 3 advancing. For Russia, it was a moment of stunned inertia. The once unthinkable had become reality. Not only were strategic bombers vulnerable, they were vulnerable at home. And the third strike hadn't even begun. By the time Drone 3 was nearing its target area, the atmosphere at Engels 2 had already shifted from disbelief to chaos. Thick black smoke from the earlier explosions churned over the airbase blanketing key sectors, including the southern bomb depot. The plan had been for Drone 3 to hit another Su-34 fighter parked near the west wing. However, the thickening smoke rendered the target unrecognizable. With no visible signature, the AI on board began a rapid recalculation of available strike targets. Within 1.7 seconds, the system processed the new environment GPS signals had been completely jammed by a nearby Russian REB unit, which had activated its interference protocols. But in a true testament to its AI-powered adaptability, Drone 3's internal gyroscope and visual recognition system kicked in. The drone's core mission did not change. The target was still clear, neutralized strategic assets. The bomb depot to the south, the one located behind Hangar Delta, had been a secondary target, but now it became the primary. This depot, housed in a dilapidated Soviet-era structure, was only lightly fortified. Its tin roof and corrugated steel walls had never been designed to withstand such an assault. The latest intelligence from U.S. and Ukrainian satellites confirmed that the depot was heavily stocked with over 30 Fab-250 and KAB-500 bombs, including several high-priority munitions designated for the Tu-160 Blackjack fleet. Drone 3 adjusted its flight path. The approach angle 27 degrees ideal for penetration at low speed. Speed dropped to 125 km/h to optimize guidance under the now imperfect conditions. With no GPS and no reliance on external navigation systems, Drone 3 used visual tracking and its onboard gyroscopic sensors to lock onto the weakest structural point, the sloped roof seam of the depot. At 4:26 a.m., Drone 3 impacted precisely where the sloped roof met the reinforced concrete wall, the structural Achilles heel. It didn't wait for the massive detonation to unfold. The initial explosion from the Fab-250 set off a chain reaction that would obliterate the entire area. Seconds after Drone 3 struck the sky above Engels 2 became an inferno. The Fab-250 bomb detonated with a roar, sending shockwaves through the depot's weak structure. The tin roof was instantly shredded, but the real destruction began when the KAB-500 munitions stored beneath it reacted. In the split second that followed one bomb's massive explosion, triggered another and another, until the entire arsenal erupted in a cataclysmic domino effect. The first wave of the explosion crushed the depot's steel walls and sent fragments flying, but it was the second wave triggered by a chain of KAB-500 detonations that turned Engels 2 into a ruin. The blast expanded outward in every direction, creating an impact radius of over 200 meters, sending debris over 300 meters into the air. The KAB-500s, each capable of devastating a small city block, unleashed hell, producing intense fires and a shockwave that rattled nearby windows in Saratov, nearly 40 kilometers away. The 200-meter thermal column that rose in the aftermath was visible from commercial satellites orbiting overhead a towering plume of smoke and fire marking the devastation. For a brief moment, the entire western wing of Engels 2 disappeared in the explosion, leaving nothing but the ruins of a once thriving airbase and an air of stunned silence. The maintenance and munitions sectors were completely eradicated, and with them Russia's ability to project long-range air power in the near future. This was more than a tactical loss for Russia. The entire western sector of Engels 2 was rendered uninhabitable. Fuel reserves were consumed in the flames, radar systems were obliterated, and two of Russia's most valuable aircraft, the Tu-95 and Su-34, had been reduced to wreckage. From the Ukrainian mobile command post, the operators watched as the thermal signature from the explosion continued to spike. Strike complete, depot neutralized. No survivors, came the confirmation. Within minutes, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones began tracking Russian evacuation efforts as they redeployed critical assets further west, away from the danger zone. But the damage was already done. A base that had been vital to Russian air superiority on the Donetsk-Zaporizhia front was no longer operational. For 10-14 days at the very least, Russia would have no air support to conduct precision strikes against Ukrainian cities. No Tu-95s, no Su-34s, and no ability to launch the bombing campaign they had planned for months. The destruction of Engels 2, a vital node in Russia's long-range bomber network, sent ripples far beyond the borders of Ukraine. For the United States, this was not just a Ukrainian victory, it was a wake-up call. The U.S. military has long been the world's preeminent superpower, with its advanced technology, nuclear deterrent, and global reach. But what Ukraine had just demonstrated was the power of asymmetric warfare, how a relatively small nation armed with innovative low-cost drones could challenge a massive adversary's entire military strategy. This wasn't a fight over territory, it was a fight over the future of warfare itself. For the Pentagon, the implications were immediate and profound. Analysts began reviewing the strike from every angle: how drones had outsmarted advanced Russian radar, how AI-driven autonomy had allowed for real-time decision-making, and how low-cost platforms could neutralize multi-billion-dollar assets. It wasn't just about the technology, it was about the shift in military doctrine. The U.S. Air Force and Navy had already been adapting to drone technologies for years, but Ukraine's success accelerated a critical debate. How does the U.S. maintain dominance if warfare is no longer about sheer firepower and massed airstrikes? Across the Atlantic, NATO was already discussing how to incorporate this kind of swarming drone technology into their own air defense systems. U.S. allies in Europe, like Germany and Poland, were quick to update their own radar systems, recalibrating them to track low-altitude stealthy threats that could easily bypass traditional defenses. On Capitol Hill, defense contractors received a flurry of calls from Pentagon officials requesting proposals for advanced counter-drone systems technologies designed not just to intercept drones, but to track and defeat the autonomous threat posed by these low-cost, high-impact tactics. New technologies such as the Aegis Ashore system, which had been used to counter ballistic missiles, were being considered for adapting to target drones. This new frontier of warfare was forcing U.S. military strategists to reimagine their battlefield concepts, no longer just about outspending the enemy, but about outsmarting them at every turn. As the dust settled over Engels 2, the reverberations of Ukraine's drone strike spread across the geopolitical landscape. The United States wasn't the only power watching this technological breakthrough unfold. The world's other great powers were taking note, each calculating how to adjust their own strategies in the face of such a monumental shift in warfare. In Russia, the aftermath was chaotic. With Engels 2 out of commission, the Kremlin scrambled to reassess its military posture on the Donetsk-Zaporizhia front. For weeks, Russian bombers and strike fighters had reigned supreme in the skies over Ukraine, but now Russia faced an acute shortage of operational bombers, forcing them to redeploy Pantsir S-1 air defense systems initially designed for frontline protection, back to their deep rear bases for defensive countermeasures. Surveillance drones were activated 24/7 to scan for further low-altitude incursions, while the Russian Ministry of Defense conducted immediate inspections of all bomb depots, searching for weaknesses exposed by the Ukrainian strike. Internally, Moscow's leadership faced a political crisis. The Russian media remained silent about the strike, only releasing vague statements about technical difficulties. But the true scope of the failure was clear. Russia's air superiority was no longer guaranteed, and the drones that had evaded their defenses had sent a clear message. For the Kremlin, this was more than a tactical loss. It was an erosion of confidence in their technological edge. The global narrative was shifting in favor of the smaller, more agile nations, challenging traditional powers, and Russia found itself struggling to adapt. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, China and Iran were closely observing the developments in Ukraine. The Chinese government, already investing heavily in asymmetric warfare technologies, saw the Ukrainian strike as a potential model for their own anti-access area denial strategies. For Iran, which had been developing its own low-cost drone technology for years, the strike offered validation of their investment in autonomous, swarming technologies. Both nations, long aligned with Russia on issues of military technology and strategy, now found themselves re-evaluating their own approaches to conflict. For NATO, the strike forced a re-evaluation of its defensive posture and capabilities. The ability of low-cost drones to cripple high-value targets with pinpoint precision was a game-changer. NATO defense officials, particularly in Germany and Poland, began calling for an urgent update to air defense protocols. The alliance needed to recalibrate its radar systems to detect and counter drones in ways that would not compromise other missile defense priorities. Ukraine's success had just shown the world that asymmetric warfare powered by drones and AI was not only a tool for defensive strategies, it was an effective offensive weapon capable of disrupting even the most formidable of military machines. In the space of just 3 minutes, Ukraine didn't just cripple a Russian airbase. It delivered a stark message to the world. The era of overwhelming firepower alone is coming to an end. Engels, too, once thought to be invulnerable, now lay in ruins, a testament to the rising power of asymmetric warfare. A few low-cost drones armed with precise AI targeting and capable of outsmarting sophisticated air defense systems achieved what months of conventional warfare could not. They shattered Russia's ability to conduct one of its largest planned bombing campaigns of the war. The strategic implications are enormous. For the United States, NATO, and Russia, the lesson is clear. The cost-to-kill ratio of warfare has changed. The age of billion-dollar bombers and high-tech fighter jets being the centerpiece of military power is facing a stark new reality. Smaller, more agile nations now have the means to project power and disrupt even the largest of military forces using innovation, not just brute force. For Russia, the attack on Engels II dealt a blow not only to its military capabilities, but also to its image. In a matter of minutes, the myth of its invulnerability was shattered, and its long-range strike doctrine was put into question. The Kremlin, forced to redeploy its defenses and rethink its strategy, now finds itself grappling with a new wave of uncertainty about how to deal with threats that don't require a plane in the sky or a missile on the launch pad. As for NATO and the United States, the attack on Engels II signals an urgent shift in defense priorities. Counter-drone technologies and AI-powered autonomous warfare are no longer the future, they are the present. Asymmetry is no longer about a few fighters outnumbering drones. It's about outsmarting the enemy with less cost, less manpower, but far more precision and innovation. What's next? Will Russia recover its footing, or is this the beginning of a new era where traditional military doctrines are increasingly irrelevant? How will NATO adapt to this new world of precision, AI-driven warfare? These are the questions shaping the future of military technology.